Well, good evening, everyone. Merry Christmas and welcome to COS at Home. I am your host, Jonathan Viaud, and thank you so much for joining us for another exciting program. Tonight, we are going to be in the mood of giving. It's that time of season. So in the spirit of the giving season, I'm going to be giving you answers to two great questions from some Patriots during our mailbag segment. And we'll also talk about a way that you and I can take an action here tonight to advance the Convention of States movement and get an Article 5 convention or closer to actually being a reality by getting somebody important focused on it. So we'll talk about that tonight. For our interview segment of the program, we are excited to be welcoming back the president and founder of Patriot Academy, America's Constitution coach, Rick Green. So we've got all of that and so much more. But for anyone that is new to the show and organization, I'd like to welcome you to Convention of States. We are a grassroots movement focused on the goal of utilizing Article 5 of the U.S. Constitution in order to call a convention for proposing amendments to the Constitution that would reduce the size and scope of the federal government, impose fiscal restraints on the federal government, and place term limits on all members of Congress and federal officials. In order to hold this convention, we need 34 states to pass our resolution. And so far, we have 19 states that have done this. So welcome. Thank you for getting involved. We're really excited about where we're going in 2025. So this is a great time to be getting involved with Convention of States. And we're so glad to have you with us tonight. Okay, let's go ahead and get things started now with 5 for 5. Okay, so tonight for 5 for 5, we wanted to remind you about the Article 5 Scholar Series, right? This is a series, we've talked about it on COS at Home before. This was launched on Constitution Day, and a new episode debuted every week for 12 weeks, and it concluded just yesterday. These are video versions of essays written by Article 5 scholars such as Robert G. Nadelson and Michael Farris. These videos are easily digestible, perfect for sending to legislators or anyone who wants to go deeper on such topics as the 1787 Convention, the Necessary and Proper Clause, the history of amendments in America, the progress of Article 5 scholarship, the rules of convention, and much more. So these are great videos, again, not too long, maybe 5 to 8 minutes, that can give people more information about any of those topics and much more. And again, it's really important that we continue to educate people on not only the history of Article 5, but all of the issues and the process on how to have a convention. And so we put this series together. And tonight we have a clip from the video on Robert Nadelson's piece. This is one of my favorite pieces, called "The Lamp of Experience: Constitutional Amendments Work."
The Lamp of Experience: Constitutional Amendments Work. Written by Robert Nadelson, Independence Institute's Senior Fellow in Constitutional Jurisprudence and head of the Institute's Article 5 Information Center. Opponents of a convention of states long argued that there was an unacceptable risk that a convention might do too much. It now appears they were mistaken, so they increasingly argue that amendments cannot do enough. The gist of this argument is that amendments would accomplish nothing because federal officials would violate amendments as readily as they violate the original Constitution. Opponents will soon find their new position even less defensible than the old. This is because the contention that amendments are useless flatly contradicts over 2 centuries of American experience that demonstrates that amendments work. In fact, amendments have had a major impact on American political life, mostly for good. The framers inserted an amendment process into the Constitution to render the underlying system less fragile and more durable. They saw the amendment mechanism as a way to correct drafting errors, resolve constitutional disputes, such as by reversing bad Supreme Court decisions, respond to changed conditions, and correct and forestall government abuse. The framers turned out to be correct, because in the intervening years we have adopted amendments for all 4 of those reasons. Today, nearly all of these amendments are accepted by the overwhelming majority of Americans, and all but very few remain in full effect. Possibly because ratification of a constitutional amendment is a powerful expression of popular political will, amendments have proved more durable than some parts of the original Constitution. Following are some examples. Correcting drafting errors. Although the framers were very great people, they still were human, and they occasionally erred. Thus, they inserted into the Constitution qualifications for senators, representatives, and the president, but omitted any for vice president. They also adopted a presidential-vice presidential election procedure that, while initially plausible, proved unacceptable in practice. The founding generation proposed and ratified the 12th Amendment to correct those mistakes. The 25th Amendment addressed some other deficiencies in Article 2, which deals with the presidency. Both amendments are in full effect today. Resolving constitutional disputes and overruling the Supreme Court. The framers wrote most of the Constitution in clear language, but they knew that, as with any legal document, there would be differences of interpretation. The amendment process was a way of resolving interpretive disputes. The founding generation employed it for this purpose just 7 years after the Constitution came into effect. In Chisholm v. Georgia, the Supreme Court misinterpreted the wording of Article 3 defining the jurisdiction of the federal courts. The 11th Amendment reversed that decision. In 1857, the court issued Dred Scott v. Sanford, in which it erroneously interpreted the Constitution to deny citizenship to African Americans. The Citizenship Clause of the 14th Amendment reversed that case. In 1970, the court decided Oregon v. Mitchell, whose misinterpretation of the Constitution created a national election law mess. A year later, Americans cleaned up the mess by ratifying the 26th Amendment. All these amendments are in full effect today and fully respected by the courts. Responding to changed conditions. The 20th Amendment is the most obvious example of a response to changed conditions. Reflecting improvements in transportation since the founding, it moved the inauguration of Congress and President from March to the January following election. Similarly, the 19th Amendment, which assured women the vote in states not already granting it, was passed for reasons beyond simple fairness. During the 1800s, medical and technological advances made possible by a vigorous market economy improved the position of women immeasurably and rendered their political participation far more feasible. Without these changes, I doubt the 19th Amendment would have been adopted. Needless to say, the 19th and 20th Amendments are in full effect many years after they were ratified. Correcting and forestalling government abuse. Avoiding and correcting government abuse was a principal reason the Constitutional Convention unanimously inserted the state-driven convention procedure into Article 5.
There you have it, folks. That's just a taste of the lamp of experience, and there's so much great stuff in there from Professor Nadelson. You even heard about some of it, right? Amendments have been proven to be a little bit more durable or even more resonate more with the populace than the actual Constitution itself. I mean, think about it. I bet you can probably name the freedoms outlined in the First Amendment, the Second Amendment, perhaps some others as well. But not many people can think about, okay, what does Article 2 cover? What does Article 3, Article 6? What does those aspects of the Constitution cover? Not many people can recite those like as readily as they can, the First Amendment, the Second Amendment, and so on. And so this article talks about why they're so important. And as you also heard there towards the end, many of these amendments that come in, they're still fully in effect. Even if people may have disagreed with them politically, they're still fully in effect. The government still adheres to what the amendments are that are in the Constitution. And that's why we believe an Article 5 convention is the way for us to ultimately rein in the out-of-control federal government, because constitutional amendments work based on the experience that we have seen. Okay, check out that and all of our Scholar Series videos. You can go to our YouTube channel. We have a full playlist there. Rumble also has a playlist, and you can watch all of those videos. You can also check them out on Facebook and other social media platforms, but YouTube and Rumble will probably be your best bet to watch those. So check out the entire Scholar Series. Now, let's hear about the latest COS news from across the country. And to do that, I will turn it over to Producer G with COS Now.
In addition to Vice President-elect J.D. Vance, President-elect Donald Trump is turning to several more prominent endorsers and supporters of Convention of States to fill significant roles in his forthcoming administration. U.S. Army veteran, best-selling author, and COS endorser Pete Hegseth was announced as Trump's nominee for Secretary of Defense.
Because I truly believe that Convention of States, this organization, this movement, and this moment is the vehicle by which us patriots can preserve our republic given to us by our founders.
Meanwhile, entrepreneur and official COS endorser Vivek Ramaswamy will help Elon Musk run the Department of Government Efficiency.
First is Article 5 convention. That's internal to the Constitution. That's within the system and how it's supposed to work. I'd say have it. I'd like to be there. And let's actually have that debate in the open.
Florida U.S. Senator and COS endorser Marco Rubio was named Secretary of State.
There's a couple things we need in this country. We need term limits, and we need a balanced budget amendment, and Congress is never going to do that for us. That's why I support an Article 5 convention of the states.
Former Governor of Arkansas Mike Huckabee will be nominated as the next U.S. ambassador to Israel.
So I strongly believe that a convention of the states empowers the people of America to get some things done that they've long wanted, perhaps term limits, but never going to get it as long as we put it in the hands of Congress.
President Trump has announced that he will be appointing yet another Convention of States endorser to his administration. This time it's Caroline Leavitt as press secretary.
I saw how corrupt the swamp really is. Corrupt career politicians on both sides of the aisle are really using the system to their advantage for their own power. So that's what really compelled me to step up and do something about that. That's why I'm a huge supporter of term limits, and it's also why I'm a supporter of the Convention of States, because that project, that movement, and as laid out in Article 5 of our Constitution, aligns with the principles that I believe. We need a government for the people, by the people, and get the federal government out of our everyday lives. The heavy hand of the feds is hurting our businesses, our economy, our education system.
Trump also picked former Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard to be the Director of National Intelligence. Although Gabbard is not an official endorser, her father, who is a Hawaii legislator by the name of Mike Gabbard, is an official sponsor of the COS resolution in that state legislature. Meanwhile, Heritage Foundation President Kevin Roberts made some very interesting comments related to convention of states and the Trump administration.
And we just need to keep as a tool in our toolbox some equally radical ideas that are very sound and legitimate, like the Convention of States. Just because Trump and Vance won doesn't mean that we should give up on that project. In fact, I am told by some Convention of State friends they're tuning in to the live stream, so thank you. But the points in Heritage, maybe having something to do with my being there the last few years, has become a sponsor of the Convention of States, because we realize the objective isn't just short term, it's long term. And I know that President Trump and Vice President Vance are thinking.
COS supporters and official endorsers who are re-elected to Congress include Chip Roy of Texas, Tracy Mann of Kansas, Russell Fry of South Carolina, Eric Burleson of Missouri, Ralph Norman of South Carolina, Josh Burkeen of Oklahoma, Mike Johnson of Louisiana, and William Timmons of South Carolina. So far, 19 states have successfully passed that resolution calling for an Article 5 convention for proposing fiscal restraints on the federal government, limits on the size, scope, and jurisdiction of the federal government, and term limits on federal officials as well as members of Congress. When 15 more states pass that same resolution, the states can propose constitutional amendments that will unleash liberty, prosperity, and a more accountable government for generations to come. Is your state on board? The momentum is real for Convention of States, but it's up to we the people to make it happen by contacting our state legislators. And finally, here's a montage of snapshots from grassroots events going on around the country for Convention of States, including Delaware, Michigan, North Carolina, Ohio, Florida, New Hampshire, New Jersey, Texas, and Oregon. And now, you're up to date with Convention of States.
What do we want? When do we want it?
Man, oh man, was that not exciting or what? I mean, if you think back to the conversation I had with Mark and Senator Rick Santorum and Rita on our last COS at Home, we were incredibly excited about the election results. And no, not just because it was Republicans that won, but it's because liberty won. It's because of what these people stand for and the victories we had at the state level, and that it gives us an opportunity to really start to push Convention of States. And the reason I say not just because Republicans won, yes, it's true, Republicans are in charge with President Trump. This also opens up an opportunity for us to speak with Democrats as well. Some of them that have been resistant to wanting to have a Convention of States called. Well, now when they see President Trump back in charge and making some of these announcements in terms of nominees, Democrats may not feel so comfortable with the federal government having as much power, and this is an opportunity for us to talk with them. But to see despite our excitement then, to see all of these pro-convention of states supporters or endorsers being nominated to be a part of this upcoming administration has us even more excited. We're going to be talking about that here in a few minutes with Rick Green, but we are really, really excited. And another one was named that didn't make the cut there from Producer G was Brooke Rollins. Brooke Rollins was nominated to be the head of the agricultural department in the federal government. I'm forgetting the exact title. Forgive me. She used to be in charge of Texas Public Policy Foundation, and she was in charge of Texas Public Policy Foundation when we were endorsed by them and when they became an official endorser and helped us pass the resolution there in Texas in 2017. So that's just another pro-convention of states voice within the Trump administration, and we're very, very excited about that. Okay, next up is our interview segment of the program featuring Rick Green. And I'll be honest with you folks, we had to pre-record this interview with Rick Green, so we won't be able to get questions from you in the audience, which always disappoints me because y'all always come with some amazing questions for our guests. But unfortunately, due to Rick's busy schedule, we had to fit this in last week before the Thanksgiving holiday. So I hope that you enjoy this conversation. But now let's go ahead and go to our interview with America's Constitution coach, Rick Green. We have the great pleasure of welcoming back to the program former Texas state legislator, the founder and president of Patriot Academy, America's Constitution coach, the Honorable Rick Green. Rick, how are you, brother?
Man, I'm doing, it's like the sun shines brighter now all of a sudden. The grass is greener. I can't imagine why, but no, doing great, man. Doing great. Good to be back.
We're so happy to have you, and it's great to have you back on the program. So first and foremost, I need to ask you about your reaction to the election at the time that we're recording this. It's about 3 weeks post-election. So how are you feeling about the statement made by the American people on November 5th?
Bro, I'm excited. I'm actually still a little bit in shock. Not that Trump won. I'm shocked that there's an appetite. There's such an appetite out there for people to see real change. Like, normally it's just, I'm just kind of frustrated with what's going on. And so I'm going to throw my vote maybe this way and see if it's any better. I think we're in for a significant shift in the country. So I'm normally optimistic, but I am super optimistic right now. I don't think anything's solved yet. I think we've, won the coin toss. Now it's time to get on the field and actually win the game. But I'm very encouraged and very optimistic.
So take us back to your reaction that night. I'd imagine you were popping on a couple of programs. I think you were on our program, our election coverage. How did you feel about what was going on that night in real time? And one of the things people were very concerned about is the integrity of the election. So from your perspective, how do you think things went?
Yeah, same concern, man. I went into the night going, okay, it feels like this should be a landslide victory going in, just based on what we're hearing on the ground, based on polling, based on so many things, but yet cautiously optimistic because of exactly that. Okay, what are they going to do to potentially steal it? What are they going to do to just muddy the water? What are they going to do to, if it is a landslide, try to fight, or even if it's just a close victory, try to fight it, drag it out over several months? What does it look like in January, if they dig in on the other side? And so all of that anxiety going into election night, trying to have peace with whatever it was going to be. And man, I can tell you the exact minute, 9:26 p.m. We're on set at Victory Channel and doing the America Stands coverage, and David Barton reads this New York Times social media post that said it looks like Trump is going. They are projecting Trump to win all of the battleground states, and so you can imagine. I mean, the fact that it was coming from New York Times, the fact that it could be that not only he squeaks by with just enough of the battleground states, but that it's a complete landslide, and they're acknowledging it that early in the night, meaning the left is acknowledging it that early in the night. I could just feel all of that anxiety go away and immediately knew, first of all, there's going to be a victory. Secondly, there's a really good chance here that it's such a big victory that all of the nastiness, all the rioting, all the things we were concerned would happen, all of the attempts to steal just vanished in an instant in that moment. Now, that's not to say there weren't some scary moments later in the evening when everything just paused at I think it was like 11:30, and everything stopped for an hour. Like people stopped counting. There was nobody reporting. And I was just like, deja vu all over again. Here we go. And we even got Pat Colbeck, my buddy from Michigan, who was in the state Senate there for years, on the phone, because he was the one that in 2020 called me at 3:00 in the morning and said, man, I'm watching the van dump the ballots here. I'm looking at the Ethernet cable plugged in. So he was watching it happen in Detroit in real time in 2020. And so we got him on and we're like, tell us it's not happening again. Anyway, of course, by morning, everything had pretty much been settled. And, by 10 or 11 the next day, everybody had capitulated. And so anyway, it was not the roller coaster that I thought would happen that night, but definitely enough. It was so strong that we could immediately start saying, okay, now what? Now what? Now we won the election. Now what do we do?
Yep. Now it's time to get ready. And we at Convention of States are very, very excited about the potential cabinet that President Trump is putting together, because many of our endorsers and supporters have been nominated to key positions. So in addition to Vice President J.D. Vance and Speaker Mike Johnson, both of whom are COS supporters, President Trump has announced nominations for Marco Rubio, Pete Hegseth, Mike Huckabee, Vivek Ramaswamy, Brooke Rollins, and Caroline Leavitt, all of whom are endorsers of Convention of States. So how do you feel about the nominations President Trump has announced so far, the team that he seems to be putting together? And is there any nomination in particular that you feel will have an immediate positive impact?
It's like Christmas every day, man. I'm telling you, these nominations are incredible. Not 100%. I think the Surgeon General one is terrible, and that one's got to be reversed. And I think it will be. I think the momentum is building for that. But almost all the other ones just stellar. And I think it bodes really well for us, for COS and for the Constitution in general. I think it will give us not just the chance to get some dialing back of the overreach of the federal government. And if Elon and Vivek and all the Doge stuff, if a 10% of that happens that they're talking about, it'll be a phenomenal day. But more importantly, the conversation about doing a convention of states, actually doing the amendments to the Constitution that will give us long-term success, not just an administration that then could potentially be reversed by the next administration. I think that is very real. I think the fact that Donald Trump's already said in one of his videos term limits and some of the other things that we're talking about here, I think Vivek and some of the others, frankly, Elon talking about the Second Amendment. I mean, who would have thought, who had that on their dance card, that Elon Musk would be talking about the real reason for the Second Amendment and the protection of all of our other rights? I mean, it's incredible, man. The conversations, even the 250th, right? Something we've talked about here at COS and that I've been pushing for through Patriot Academy for about 3 years now, to have a really big 250th celebration on July 4th, 2026. Trump's already talking about that. Now, unfortunately, he chose Iowa to do this big thing he's going to do instead of the Patriot Academy campus, but that's okay. We'll do our own thing at the Patriot Academy campus. Anyway, I think the appointments are fantastic. They're not all going to sail through. We're going to have some big fights, but boy, you talk about a shot across the bow every day. The left is freaking out. DC is freaking out, as they should. I want to see the bull in the china closet all over the place in these agencies. And if you listen to the rhetoric, and I listen, for friends that say to me, Rick, you're getting too optimistic, it's just rhetoric. Yeah, it is. It's just rhetoric, but it's rhetoric like we've never heard before. The idea that we're talking about moving some of these major agencies out to mid-America, the idea that we're challenging the presupposition, I haven't heard this in a long time, not just talking about running that agency better or, looking for savings. We're challenging the presupposition that that agency should even exist over and over again. I mean, we're talking about Department of Agriculture, Department of Education, Department of Energy. We're talking about all of these unconstitutional agencies and actually having the conversation about whether or not it should exist in the first place. That's big, bro. I mean, that is just to even say those things, let alone implement them over the next couple of years, has radically transformed the conversation, which will transform the direction that we go as a nation.
Absolutely. Now, you mentioned the Second Amendment, and I have to ask you this question, having you on with everything that you're doing there at the Patriot Academy campus, which we'll talk about in a little while, with the constitutional defense course that you've been doing for years. And we don't have an opportunity really to talk about the Second Amendment on COS at Home. So I haven't seen all of the conversations, but one thing that did catch my eye or my ear was when President Trump was talking about making concealed carry reciprocity go beyond state lines. Could you tell us a little bit about that and why that would be so important?
Yeah, a couple of years ago, well, I think it's been 4.5 years now. There was actually real momentum in Congress to finally get a national reciprocity bill through. And just for common sense, for those people that haven't thought about this before, look, you don't have to go to each state and get a new driver's license. Your driver's license allows you to drive all over this country. You have basically national reciprocity for your driver's license. It should be the exact same way with your handgun license. If you've gotten a license in your particular home state, you should be allowed to carry your weapon anywhere in the country, and that should be recognized by other states. It is a constitutional right to keep and bear arms, for the right of the people to keep and bear arms. And there was even it was actually a dissenting opinion where they refused to hear a case at the Supreme Court a couple of years ago. But Gorsuch and Thomas said in that dissenting opinion, if you think your right to keep and bear arms is just in your home, to carry from your living room to your kitchen or to your bedroom or whatever, you're missing the whole point of the Second Amendment. And so I think this is a critical piece of not only personal self-defense to be able to defend our families or individually as we're traveling around the country, but also just to recognize once again, this is a natural right of self-defense. I think it's huge. And the fact that Donald Trump would talk about it like that is big. I think it gives us a real chance to finally get this thing done, get it across the finish line. And for people that don't travel, I still encourage you to support this because it will make you safer in your state when people like me or Mark Meckler or others that have been trained to defend, when we travel, when we come and speak at your events, or we're walking through a local mall or a grocery store or a restaurant in your community, it makes you safer, your family safer, the people in your community safer. The more of us sheepdogs that are allowed to carry in any of the 50 states, the better off our country will be. So I would love to get this across the finish line.
As would I. And I think your analogy of comparing it to a driver's license is so spot on. So I hope that President Trump continues to push that all the way through. Now, you had also mentioned he discussed term limits. And I think Dr. Kevin Roberts also appeared at Texas Public Policy Foundation recently, and he was talking about how the Trump administration is not ignoring some of the long-term projects, right? So some of the things that we need to focus on in order for us to make these changes permanent. But there are some people that are going to think now we don't need to have a convention of states. We don't need to have an Article 5 amendments convention because the President Trump is in charge. But as we saw with what happened after Trump's first term, almost all of his reforms were wiped out within the first 5 minutes of the Biden administration, because a lot of it was done through executive order. So what do you say if someone says, well, let's just wait and see, let's see how Trump handles things. Isn't convention of states a chance? Isn't convention of states, doesn't that give us a chance to seize the moment and make these reforms permanent like I was talking about?
Let me say this as nicely as I can. It is absolutely impossible for Donald Trump to accomplish what needs to be accomplished to actually correct the course for our country in the long term. There is no way he will have the votes in Congress, or that he can do with executive order, or even get approved by the Supreme Court, the long-term fundamental changes that need to happen. The table needs to be reset. The federal government is completely out of control. And I appreciate the fact that Donald Trump's going to go in and get rid of some agencies, and if Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy get everything that they want, even at that point, you still need constitutional amendments, and you're not going to get those through the Congress. You have to do it at the state level. So for those that think that the election has accomplished the task, man, the election it's kind of like it's kind of like David and Goliath, and at this point the stone has hit Goliath in the head and he's falling over. Maybe Donald Trump can go in and chop the head off, like in the story of David and Goliath. but only we, the people, can pursue the Philistines and take out the brothers and actually reset the table. Only through a constitutional amendment can you actually correct the Commerce Clause for the long term. And you nailed it, man. I mean, no matter what they do, a new administration and a new Congress could reverse it. So even if Trump does a bunch of stuff through executive order, obviously a new president could reverse that. But even if we got things passed through the House and the Senate and made some really strong fundamental changes, and actually they were literally acts of Congress, that can be redone, but undone by a new Congress. And we see how fickle it is, right? Look how close the House is right now. And even in the Senate, it's going to be either at this point, I guess 53-47, most likely what it's going to turn out to be. That can change in a heartbeat. So no doubt about it. The proper constitutional long-term way to reset the table and restore our republic and put the federal government back in its box is only through constitutional amendments, and that will only happen through a convention of states. So I actually think the need is even greater, because what you're going to see right now is you're going to see essentially a sales pitch by the Trump administration for the next 4 years, selling the American people on the principles of liberty. I think he's going to be fantastic at that. He's already doing that through these videos and through the things that he's pushing. He's finally going to have an administration that he puts in place that amplifies that sales pitch for the principles of liberty. Elon Musk is sharing videos of Milton Friedman. I call him Uncle Milt. This is I'm pitching myself with the sales pitch for the principles of liberty, but that's just a sales pitch. You have to actually make the purchase, and the purchase is constitutional amendments. That's what's got to happen for the long term. So the good idea, the good thing is we're going to get air cover, right, from the feds and with this new administration, but that's just air cover. We have to do the heavy lifting in the states. So everyone out there that's been a part of this, now's the time to redouble your efforts. And the good news, man, is that I haven't heard a single person say, "Oh, good, Trump won, I can rest." Now we know some people are thinking that and doing that because they're not that involved. But everyone I've talked to, like never before, I've been doing this 30 years, I have never seen such a unified voice saying, press the gas. This just opens the door. The window is cracked. Now let's shove it open and dive through. I've never seen an appetite for following through after the election like what I'm seeing and hearing right now. That's why I'm so optimistic. It's not the election results. It's the attitude of people saying, and the appetite of people saying, let's press the gas. Let's make this really count. Let's gain ground. That's what has me hopeful.
Yeah, I'm so glad you mentioned the sales pitch on the principles for liberty, and you also mentioned before the 250th birthday of America and what President Trump has in store, because I think that aspect of things is what's so important. So a few months ago, we were honored to have Professor Randy Barnett join us on COS at Home. He had just released a book called A Life for Liberty, The Making of an American Originalist. And in it, he referenced that during the Tea Party movement, he was encouraged that there was a desire to restore what he refers to as the lost Constitution. Now, what struck me about this passage and that part of the book, however, was that despite the fact that the Tea Party movement was only 15 years ago, it seems that the Constitution has remained an afterthought for many, particularly over the last 4 years. And to me, as a nation, without a respect for or an understanding of our history, America is left exposed and vulnerable to tyranny. When we think about the last 4 years, whether it was the COVID lockdowns, the vaccine mandate, the wide open southern border, our individual liberties, which are safeguarded by the Constitution, have been trampled on and abused. So I think you would agree with me that the opportunity now is there with this administration, with some of the victories we've seen at the state level, where we can start to reignite the flame for liberty and inspire an awakening for a renewed respect of our founding era again in this country. Do you believe that is possibly the most important aspect of this next 4 years under the Trump administration and what has gone on at the state level?
Without question, man, everything you just said, spot on. Listen, the petri dish where bad government grows is biblical and civic ignorance. We've been ignorant for a couple of generations now as a nation, and so that's why we've allowed bad government to grow. And I would say this, I think it's absolutely accurate. The Tea Party was a linchpin moment in 2009, but it was just the beginning of the movement. So we're 15 years later, and I guess I would liken it to, if we go all the way back to 1761. So in 1761, James Otis gave a famous speech against writs of assistance, which was essentially where the British could come into your home. It was kind of the old show me the man, I'll show you the crime, right? They would come in and they could search for anything, and there was no limitations. He gives this speech against writs of assistance in 1761. So think about that timeline. John Adams said that was the moment when independence was born, and then it grew up to adolescence 15 years later. So in 1776, we declare independence. That the movement began in 1761 with that speech from James Otis. 15 years later, you get the Declaration of Independence. It's another 15 years before you actually get the Bill of Rights. So it's 30 years from the time he gives the speech against writs of assistance to when you actually get the 4th and 5th and 6th Amendments that prevent those things from happening. So 30 years that it took, an entire movement, a lot of places we could pick out in there, but I think in many ways, that speech, I'm blanking on the guy's name that in 2009, April of 2009, they said we need another Tea Party. Rick, anyway, whatever his name was. Yeah, you know what I'm talking about, right? And then of course Meckler and all these guys start the Tea Party, and it was on fire for several years. And now you've still got some vestiges of Tea Party groups across the country, but the movement continued, and it moved into Convention of States and Patriot Academy and all these other organizations out there. And I think what has happened, this is just my theory, but I think what has happened is over the last 15 years, you've had a certain level of education and rebirth of a love of the Constitution, as Randy would say, the lost Constitution, and a hatred of what I call the Constitution, where government has remade the Constitution without us. And so you've had a certain level of that, probably a couple of million people out of 350 million. That's not enough, but a couple of million people. And now I believe that appetite for those couple of million people to now spread that across the nation and get us to that critical mass of 5 to 10 million people, and that'll push the whole thing in the right direction. And the reason I think it's only 5 to 10 million that's needed is that's 3%. Well, that's 3 to 6% of the presidential voting population. So I actually think we're doing pretty good. I think we're at that 15-year mark from the wake-up call in 2009. And over the next 15 years, I believe we'll see an absolute resurgence and a rebirth of those principles in the Constitution and the Declaration. But it's exactly what you were saying. It's that education piece. It's that getting people to understand why it's not enough to win an election. You have to have a restoration of civic literacy, of biblical literacy, of the very foundational principles that make the country great in the first place. And then we'll see, a 50 to 100-year benefit on that, right? Where people will get to once again live the good times because we went through the tough times. We created tough men, and we did what it takes to create the good times, and then we'll get soft again. But right now, we've got a chance to wake up people to stop being soft and to actually get in there and do the hard work and the heavy lifting.
Well said. And I looked it up. It was Rick Santelli.
That's it. I could not remember. And he wasn't even a Fox News reporter. I think he was MSNBC or something like that.
So, or CNBC, something like that. Yeah.
Yeah. He was like I think he was a financial guy. I remember he was standing in front of like the stock exchange or something. Anyway, yeah, that was really the birth of it.
Yep. And I love the illustration too that you pointed there. I think it was Otis Smith's speech, and then 15 years later you had the declaring of independence, and then 15 years after that the Bill of Rights. So it'll be fascinating. We'll have to come back and do another COS at Home 15 years from now, Rick, and talk about where we are and really see. Two organizations that have already been working incredibly hard to inspire that passion for self-governance are Convention of States and Patriot Academy. And a few months ago, Convention of States Foundation held the Grassroots Article 5 experience at the new Patriot Academy campus. So you had the opportunity to serve as the president of this convention. Could you tell us a little bit about that experience?
Man, we had such a great time, and it was so good to have grassroots activists be the commissioners and actually get to participate in the process like that. I did text a couple of senator friends of mine right afterwards, and they were going to serve as president of the convention, and then some things came up, and they couldn't make it. And I said, you really made a mistake, because after having the gavel in my hand for a couple of days, the power went totally to my head, and I now want to be a dictator. It was really fun, man. We had a great time. We have our own legislative hall there now at the Patriot Academy campus, and it's mock-up of the Texas House Chamber, House Representatives Chamber. And it was really cool because they got to go through and bring amendments. They debated them heavily in committee. They came out on the House floor, and we debated them in the plenary convention. It was a plenary session. It was awesome, man. And I think the more we do that, the more palpable this becomes, right? The more people see that in action, the more it defeats these these arguments against, it's going to be chaos, and there's going to be this, and there's going to be that. And the reality is, when you do one, you realize, that's why it would be impossible for these crazy amendments to even get out of the convention. But even if they did, still require ratification of 38 states. So I think it's critical that we do these as often as possible, and that not just legislators do them, but we, the people that are doing the grassroots work right now, that we get to do those. So we're going to do it as often as possible at the Patriot Academy campus. It's very similar, honestly, to our Patriot Experience, where we do a legislative simulation. So people should come do that as well. So whether you do an actual convention of states simulation, or you do a legislative simulation, there's something about sitting on the House floor, making the motions, going to the back microphone, defending your bill, working through it in committee. I've always said this: if you do that as a citizen, you will be a better citizen. You'll be able to talk to your legislator better. You'll be able to go testify in a committee at the legislature, or your school board, or your city council. There's just something about that hands-on. It's not enough to read about it, watch a video about it, take a class on it. You need to do this, and so, man, everybody consider coming. We're gonna try to do our simulations at least once a month. The Patriot Experience legislative simulation is going to happen December 10th through 12th. Anybody that wants to come be a part of that, and we'll probably do them once a month in 2025. And I'd love to have them going every week after that, man. In 2026, if we get it down enough and we have enough staff at the campus to be able to handle it. But it is a great way for people to really see this thing in motion, actually experience it, not just see it, but actually get some good practice at it too.
Yeah,
live
absolutely.
It, be a part of it. That's it. Yeah.
So just a few weeks ago, our Texas team was also welcomed onto the Patriot Academy campus, which is in Comfort, Texas, right? And we held our Leaders Summit, where the team discussed strategy for the upcoming legislative session, as well as ways to continue to build our Texas grassroots army. And it is an absolutely beautiful campus. I had the opportunity to be there. I missed what's called the Mark and Rick show that took place on Friday night, just after dinner. So I didn't have a chance to see you there, sir. But it was just beautiful to be on that campus. And I believe we were in what is a replica of the Texas State House. Is that what that room was?
That's right.
Tell us a little bit more about the campus and what is coming next regarding the development of as that continues.
Yeah, we it's an exact replica of the dais, the Texas House Chamber dais, and then the desks and the chairs and the balcony and gallery and all that. It's not an exact replica, but it's close. It feels like you're in a real legislative chamber, so that helps create the environment where you really do the training just sticks, man. It's like there's just something about it that's powerful. So yeah, it was a great time, even just for the training and the preparation for the upcoming session, and had a representative that came and talked about that's going to be the sponsor for the getting rid of the sunset clause, and it was a good weekend. I'll tell you what's next. In addition to doing these simulations in that chamber, building Independence Hall is our next big move. So we've got our chamber now, our legislative hall. We also have committee rooms that are named after some great folks, and you can do a full session there. But I just think Independence Hall, there's something about it, man. It's the cradle of liberty. It's where both the Declaration and the Constitution was done. I love doing my Constitution class in Independence Hall. I've done that a lot, but I hate going to Philadelphia. And so we're going to build our own Independence Hall right there at the Patriot Academy campus. The goal is to break ground on that on July 4th, 2025. So that's only a few months away, and to have it built by July 4th, 2026, and have 10,000 people out there cutting the ribbon with me when the 250th birthday of the nation happens. And so if anybody wants to be a part of that, $17.76 a month is our donation we're asking people to do. Or you can sponsor a brick or sponsor a desk in the chamber or whatever you want to do to help. But patriotacademy.com is a place to go do that. And then just come visit, go through one of these simulations, do the handgun defense class. There's a lot of cool stuff you can do to participate. But that's the next big thing, man, Independence Hall.
That is awesome, and I'm really looking forward to that. So we're going to have to, tell some people, look, you can go to Iowa, you can be there for the state, but you really want to go to Comfort, Texas, and be there at the Patriot Academy campus when Independence Hall in Texas is opened. So that'll be amazing. So my last question for you, sir, you had mentioned the Constitution Alive courses that you had filmed there in Independence Hall, and that was kind of where I wanted to go next, because one of the things that you mentioned during that course really kind of it blew my mind when you said it. And it was one of those things where I'm like, I'm going to have to borrow that. And I have borrowed it a couple of times, but you talked about how the fate of the free world depends on you and me. And that seems kind of crazy to people, but you kind of broke it down and you said many people think that the fate of the free world depends on America, and America depends on its constitutional foundation and liberty. And at the very top of the Constitution, the first words are "we the people," right? So therefore, the fate of the free world depends on we the people, we the American people, you and me. And one of the things that I usually close our show with and underscore to people is that, yes, we are facing a lot of difficulties and trying times right now, but the beauty of everything is that the solution is with you and with me, we the people. So if you could just briefly explain what you mean by that, why it comes down to us, and what are some of the ways that we can take action to actually protect what is the fate of the free world, what are the founding principles that gird our nation. What is it that we can do, and how can we start to be the type of self-governing activists that can save not only America but the world?
Man, I really believe we're blessed to live in a nation where, unlike most nations and most people in the history of the world, they didn't have the ability or the stewardship of actually directing the fate of their nation, which in our case is going to direct the fate of the free world, because we are still the ultimate, hope for mankind if people want to live in freedom. And John F. Kennedy had a great quote in his inaugural address where he talked about in the long history of the world, only a few generations have been granted the role of defending freedom in its hour of maximum danger. And that's us. I mean, we're one of those generations. We are the safeguards of the torch of freedom in a way that, most generations, even in America, haven't had that responsibility like we do, because we're at that inflection point where it can go either way. And again, like we talked about earlier, I mean, we have not won this fight. We are still in serious danger of losing freedom in America. And if we don't press the gas, if we don't shove that window open that's cracked right now and dive through, if we don't gain ground back, I'm telling you, the Marxists are not done. They are absolutely regrouping right now, and they have gained so much ground. They run every major institution in America, from entertainment to journalism to our most of our political institutions, to too many of our corporate boards in the business world. I mean, every area of the culture. They gained a lot of ground in the last 50 years. And so if we don't take that ground back, we will lose America. I mean, we're just that's the way it works. Every 250 years, roughly, major nations and civilizations fall apart. And so if we're going to go the way of the world throughout history, we will lose the country. But because we've interrupted that cycle of tough times making tough men, good times, soft men leading to tough times, because we're just entering the tough times, and we've done the things necessary to interrupt that cycle and now have the opportunity to get us back to good times, we can short circuit that 250 mark that most people fall apart and actually have a rebirth of freedom in this country. But it comes back to exactly what you just said. We have to be the ones to do it. We can't count on Donald Trump or politicians or anybody else. We have to do it in our homes. We have to do it personally. We have to train our children in this way, and we have to be willing to take ground locally. And I'm talking like not just school boards and city councils. I mean water districts. I'm talking about HOAs. I'm talking about every level of government where the left has made little fiefdoms to take over our property and our business and raising our children and all that. We have to take all of that ground back. And so To John F. Kennedy's point, I mean, here we are at the maximum hour of danger. What are we going to do to make sure that we regain that ground and we preserve it for future generations? And doing that through COS, through Patriot Academy, these organizations that are dedicated to doing the hard work and making sure we get that 50 to 100-year benefit of the things that we're doing with our lives right now. Plugging in, not trying to do it on your own, having an organization like COS and Patriot Academy to team up with and meet new people. I mean, you hear it all the time, just like I do, and Mark does, but most people felt like they were totally alone. And in 2020, man, I mean, it was like they woke up and they found us, or they found COS, and then through COS, they found Patriot Academy, or through Patriot Academy, they found COS. I hear it over and over and over again. The hope that brought, the community that brought, the people that they could lock shields with and sharpen countenance. So it's all right there for people to plug into. So my last thing I would say is lean in right now. Lean in, rededicate yourself, set aside a certain amount of money, a certain amount of time, and say, I'm going to invest in freedom in 2025. I'm going to do my part to press the gas and make this thing happen. And I'm going to plug in with Patriot Academy and COS to do it. I mean, the table's set. Let's feast.
That is so well said, sir. Rick, it is such an honor to have you. I feel like we could keep talking. There's so much more to discuss, but you have been so wonderful with your time, and we're so grateful to have a partnership with you and to have you supporting our organization and be able to work with Patriot Academy. So thank you so much for joining us. God bless you, brother.
Right back at you, man. God bless. Have a good one.
What an incredible conversation that was with Rick Green, and I really appreciate all of the things that he said there, and there's so much in there that it was a deep, rich conversation. We covered a lot of different ground, and education is a vitally important thing because we have to be able to get out there, educate people about the importance of self-governance, and then do the actual work to make self-governance possible and make it a reality once again. As Rick was talking about, we cannot rest on our laurels, and he's hearing that most people aren't, right? We're still willing to go out and do the work. We can't just look at an election and sit back and say, all right, our job is done. We still have to get out there, educate people, and inspire people, and do the work that's necessary to save our country. And Patriot Academy is doing so much great work. In fact, we wanted to share with you a brief video about the Patriot experience that Rick mentioned in our interview, and we will go ahead and roll that right now.
The Patriot experience happens right here in this new legislative hall that we just built here at the Patriot Academy campus. And it's so much more than just learning. The legislative simulation, the life purpose planning, the communications training so that you can be effective at winning people over to your values and to the constitutional republic that we have, getting them to love America again. And then to top it all off, you're going to get some really good Constitution training, in-depth Constitution training. I'm looking forward to being with you and getting to do a big part of that. And constitutional defense training, the physical training to be able to defend yourself and your family in the moment. We have the greatest ranges in the country, the best instructors on the planet, and the best programs for you. Whether you've never touched a gun in your life or you've been training your whole life, you will enjoy this course and the fellowship. All of this in 1 week, well, less than 1 week. So come spend a few days with us, enjoy the Patriot experience, and then go home and light a brush fire of liberty in your neighborhood, at your church, in your home, in your community, and let's save this constitutional republic. Check out the details below and come see us right here at the Patriot Academy campus.
They really are doing some incredible work, and it is a beautiful campus. So make sure you check out the Patriot Experience if you can't get there for that. They also have constitutional defense courses. I know a friend of mine was just out at a constitutional defense course with two COS endorsers, Daniel Horowitz and Steve Deace. I have Pete Hegseth on my mind from our conversation before. Steve Deace and Daniel Horowitz were out there doing that constitutional defense course with Rick Green. So there are a number of different constitutional defense courses and other things available. Follow them, check it out, go to patriotacademy.com and learn a lot more about that. Okay, let's move to action at home. Okay, so as I mentioned earlier, tonight we're going to once again do action together where we can really try to move the Convention of States movement forward. And the way that we're going to do that is right now, we're going to ask President Trump to support Convention of States and help us in draining the swamp permanently. So if you're in front of your computer, please go on over to conventionofstates.com/Trump. I'm going to ask producer G if he could go ahead and bring that up, and he could navigate this for us a little bit here. And as you can see, this is an open letter that we have written for President Trump, and we'd like for you to add your name to it. So it starts by saying, "Dear President Trump, congratulations on your victorious return to the White House. Your commitment to the American people and determination to rein in federal overreach have once again resonated across this nation. You've given a voice to millions who believe in freedom, accountability, and a government that truly serves its people. Thank you for your leadership and for championing these foundational principles." It goes on to say near the bottom, "Mr. President, this is a chance for us to make history together and to permanently fulfill many of your promises to the American people. During your first inaugural address, you said your presidency represented a transfer of power from D.C. back to the people. This growing movement and the authority entrusted to us in Article 5 will allow us to fulfill the founders' vision and your vision of a federal government that is limited, accountable, and constrained by the will of the people. By supporting COS, you can help cement a legacy of freedom that will last beyond your term, protecting the liberties and prosperity of future generations." And then near at the bottom, you could go ahead and put your name on there, your first name, your last name, your email address, add it. We want to get this in front of President Trump. So please, if you would, go ahead, go there right now, conventionofstates.com/Trump. And again, the reason that we are doing this, the reason we are asking President Trump to use Article 5 and COS to help drain the swamp permanently, right? That's what we were talking about with Rick a few minutes ago. Reforms from a single president can be swept away in the first 5 minutes of the next administration, right? We saw this under President Biden in 2021. Everything that President Trump had done with executive orders, boom, gone with new executive orders. So if we really want to drain the swamp, as President Trump has talked about, or just as we have said, return our government to the size that the founders and the framers expected, give us the opportunity to build or to restore a culture of self-governance, then we need to do this permanently through an Article 5 convention. Our goal is to get 1 million signatures on this and put it on President Trump's desk. I should have gotten the tally to see exactly how close we are to that. Unfortunately, I don't have that information in front of me. I just thought of it now, so I apologize for that. But we want to get 1 million signatures on this, so please go to conventionofstates.com/Trump. You can go ahead and sign it, and then please share this everywhere. Share it with friends, families, get their name on there. Tell President Trump to support an Article 5 convention so that this way we can make all of these fixes and drain the swamp permanently. All right, so now let's check the Minutemen mailbag. All right. So tonight, as I mentioned, it's Christmas season. The Christmas season is upon us. So I'm in a giving mood, and I want to give you answers to 2 different questions in our audience. And the Patriots that submitted these questions, I really appreciate them. And I think that you're going to appreciate what they put forward. So the first one was submitted by Mary Carol Brown. Mary, that is a very appropriate name for this season. Why does Congress not enforce the checks and balances of their branch of government, or why don't they do what's necessary to use those checks and balances? And this is a great question. So first, I want to dispel this notion that we have 3 co-equal branches of government. I know that's usually what we're taught in school, but that's actually not the case, right? The reason is because the most powerful branch in our system of government is the one closest to the people. And that is the legislative branch. And why are they the most powerful? Well, think about it. They have the ability to override a presidential veto. They control the purse strings. They provide advice and consent on presidential nominations or treaties to the president, right? They also have the ability to define the jurisdiction of the Supreme Court, and they have the ability to redefine the size and structure of the court, right? It is an extremely powerful branch, but since it is divided into two chambers and since there are so many members of Congress, it's not easy for them to fully utilize all of their power. Nevertheless, they are the most powerful branch. Now, to Mary's question, why don't they enforce these checks and balances? Or I think more directly to the spirit of Mary's question is, why is Congress shirking its duty generally? And I believe the reason for that is because congressional leadership, both parties, regardless of who's in charge, Republicans or Democrats, have decided that they are content with allowing the fourth branch of the federal government to handle the legislative function, right? There are more rules and regulations created by the federal bureaucracy than laws passed by Congress. In fact, if you go and you use the Convention of States presentation, we have a video, I think it was put out by Senator Mike Lee's office, that shows you in a stack of papers the amount of laws passed in a given year and the amount of rules and regulations put forward by the bureaucracy. It will blow your mind as you watch the papers stack up and see them stack next to each other. It's the bureaucracy that has really been has taken on the legislative process, which obviously the bureaucracy, I say fourth branch of the federal government, they're not in the Constitution. And so this is not acceptable, right? And still, Congress has done this. Worse yet, we had the Supreme Court issue opinions such as Chevron deference that has allowed Congress to pass vague and confusing legislation, and the bureaucracy was given the power to fill in the gaps. Now, thankfully, the court decision was overturned earlier this year, but the beast has already been let out of its cage, right? And it will take more than just an overturned Supreme Court decision to bring the bureaucracy to heel. So why has Congress outsourced their responsibilities? Well, there are many reasons, but I would say that the most likely reason of all, was not that their hearts are 3 sizes too small, but there may be some Congress members that do have some hearts that are 3 sizes too small, but that they are addicted to power. If they are forced to actually do their jobs, then there will be political risk that goes along with that, which means that they may not be reelected. So what's the solution? Well, earlier in the program, when we talked with Rick Green about some of the changes that will be coming through President Trump's nominations, and trust me, I am confident that President Trump will begin to drain the swamp during his upcoming administration. However, as we have mentioned, and we've said this over again, and I mentioned just a few minutes ago when we were signing that open letter to President Trump, the only way to ensure that these changes are permanent is through an Article 5 convention and the amendment process. That is where a convention of states comes in. And it also brings us to question number 2. And Frances Campbell wrote in saying, if the surveys, and I think she means the polls, are accurate, why in the world do state legislatures not listen to the people and pass the Convention of States resolution? Well, Producer G, if you don't mind, would you bring up the graphics that we have related to the polling that we've done? I think this one here was done in 2022. And as you can see there, overwhelming majority, regardless of political party, Republican, Democrat, other people want this. They want a convention of states, right? They believe in the things that we are standing for. And could you also bring up the graphic that we have from 2024, where we just did some more polling? And look at that, 68% of Americans support a meeting of the states to propose amendments for fiscal responsibility, limits on the federal power, and term limits for career politicians. There's more to that survey, but just looking at that, it's clear that the majority of the people, doesn't matter political party, Americans, 68% of Americans want to see a convention called where these amendments would be discussed, right? So why is it that state legislatures are not tripping over themselves, or as we saw in Texas, having a Texas stampede to the dais and signing their name to be a co-sponsor or a co-author to this resolution as it gets passed? Why isn't this happening? Well, Francis, the unfortunate reality is that many legislators are not aware of the polls, right? Though we've done everything we can, we've endeavored to get these results right in front of them. We've done all that we can. Many of them are not aware of it, right? However, there are still many that are aware of the poll results, have seen the information that Convention of States has sent to them, and still reject the idea of having a convention, whether it's due to irrational fears over a runaway convention or because they mistakenly believe in centralized power for the federal government or because of special interests. Whatever the reason, they still stand against this. Now, it is our job as grassroots activists, as self-governing citizens, to engage with these legislators, educate them on this process, and advocate for them to support and pass this legislation, right? This is what we were talking about with Rick Green towards the end. How can we, the people, be the ones to save the fate of the free world? This is how we do it, right? It's through having an Article 5 convention. It's getting out and talking with the legislators and building relationships with them and encouraging them to take the action that's necessary to bring our country back to the vision that the founders had laid out for us. So the way that you want to do this, the best way to get involved and actually make this happen is to volunteer on your state team. So if you would, please visit conventionofstates.com/act. Producer G has it on the screen there. You will go to that website. You will see the volunteer opportunities, and you'll be able to submit your application to join your state team and help make an Article 5 convention a reality. So I want to thank Mary and Francis again for these great questions that we have this evening. And if you would like to be a part of the program by submitting a question in the future, please submit it going to conventionofstates.com/mailbag. We appreciate y'all so very, very much. And I greatly appreciate the questions that we get. Thank you for doing this, and please be a part of the program by going there and submitting your question. Okay, let's move on now to COS Voices. Okay, so usually during this segment, we hear from activists as they answer one of our top questions, one of the top questions we receive, which is, how can I effectively communicate the COS message quickly? Well, tonight, we're doing something a little bit different, right? I mentioned it's the season of giving, and we're fully into the Christmas season. Just yesterday was Giving Tuesday, and many folks, like yours truly, are preparing to make their year-end donations to various different organizations. So tonight, instead of answering that question, we're going to hear from one of our volunteers about why she donates both time and treasure to Convention of States. So here is Diane Gomez from Indiana.
Hi, I'm Diane Gomez, a proud volunteer for Convention of States. I'm also a grandmother and concerned about the course of our nation. As such, I'm a monthly donor for Convention of States because I know that this is the one long-term solution we have to restore our government. I donate $1 a day to keep the feds away, and I know my money is going to an organization that is fiscally responsible. So often when we support other organizations, the money goes to overhead to support perhaps a large office building or a high rise for all the employees to work in, but we don't do that. The money that we invest goes directly towards training activists to get the resolution passed to reach our 34 state threshold. It goes towards lobbying legislators and educating the public. So I urge you to do the same thing, and I will continue supporting Convention of States. Thanks.
So there you have it, folks. If you are willing to make Convention of States one of the organizations you donate to at this time of the year, you may do so by texting COS Give to 888-444-8774. That's COS Give to 888-444-8774. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we have now reached the conclusion of our program. And just a reminder, all of the COS at Home shows, they air live on the first Wednesday of every month at 8 o'clock Eastern, 7 o'clock Central Time. However, we have a program note that I wanted to share with you about next month's COS at Home. That is that the first Wednesday of the month in January is January 1st, which is New Year's Day. So we're going to push the program back 1 week. We don't want to interrupt your time with family and the merrymaking that you will be doing this time of year. So our next show is going to be Wednesday, January 8th at 8 o'clock Eastern, 7 o'clock Central Time. And we're going to have a special edition COS at Home with a roundtable discussion with state legislators from states that have already passed the COS resolution. We've already got 3 great guests lined up. We've also reached out to a couple others. We have Representative Dan Eubanks from Mississippi, Senator Dan Knodel from Wisconsin, and Representative Mark LePack from Oklahoma. 3 amazing champions of Convention of States. We're hoping to have a couple of other voices as well join us. We're going to be talking about their experience, what it was like when they passed the resolution in those states, and what advice they may have for others as we try to get our resolution passed in 2025 in some other states and more. So I hope that you'll join us. I think it's going to be a wonderful conversation. I have had the opportunity to get to know 2 of these gentlemen by serving in their states, and I'm looking forward to talking with them and giving you the opportunity to get to know them as well. So I hope you'll join us again Wednesday, January 8th at 8 o'clock Eastern, 7 o'clock Central Time. And ladies and gentlemen, we are at the conclusion of our program. Once again, I hope that you have enjoyed the show and that it was helpful to you and that you learned something. I want to give a thank you again to Rick Green for joining us tonight. A huge thanks, as always, to the legend, Producer G, all of his hard work behind the scenes, dealing with me and pulling up graphics and trying to follow me along. It's not easy, so I appreciate him. But of course, the greatest thanks, seriously, the greatest thanks always goes to all of you for your continued support of Convention of States and the Article 5 movement. It's important to remember, like I told Rick before, the way I close out these shows, it's important to remember that despite all of the obstacles that we face, and yes, we're excited about the prospect of what could be coming in 2025 and beyond, let's face it, there's still problems, right? And we still have to be willing to confront these problems. No matter what, you and I, we the people, we are the solution. The fate of the free world depends on us. So we need to be engaged. And I'm thankful that you are here and you're willing to do what is necessary. So I want to thank you. I want to wish you a very Merry Christmas, a Happy New Year, Happy Hanukkah. God bless all of you. Thank you again for your support of Convention of States. Have a wonderful evening and enjoy the holiday season. God bless everyone.